So something happened in the atheist skeptic community recently that was an eye-opener for a lot of people. It wasn't an eye-opener for everybody because there are some folks in the community who have been paying attention and have been trying to warn everybody else that this problem has existed for years and have made some progress, but in other areas have just been completely ignored or silenced, or people just act like they're not there, or what they say doesn't have any merit. And what I'm talking about is the recent Mythinformation conference in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. MythCon. It was put on by an organization called Mythicist Milwaukee. And the entire event was a shit show, and it was predictably so. It was obvious that it was going to be a shit show from the moment certain speakers were announced. What made this conference different from past versions of MythCon, which up into this year seemed okay, and most other skeptical conferences that are held around the country and around the world in general, was that 3 of the featured speakers were professional YouTube misogynists and racists and rape apologists and just generally awful people with fan bases of similarly awful people. And those 3 people were first on a double bill, armored skeptic and shoe on head, 2 absolutely vile, disgusting human beings who bully trans people, who promote misogynist, sexist, racist talking points, who are 2 of the most vile, disingenuous, awful people that I can think of. And one of the few people I can think of who is worse than they are is the other person that I'm talking about, who was invited to be a featured speaker at MythCon, which is Carl Benjamin, also known as Sargon of Akkad, one of the most disgusting human beings on the planet, who made the newspaper in the UK last year for sending a rape taunt to a member of parliament who was herself a survivor of sexual assault. And the occasion for Mr. Benjamin sending her this rape taunt was that she was gaining some publicity for being part of a campaign to end online harassment. Wonder why he felt threatened by that. So MythCon happens. Carl Benjamin is on stage along with a great guy, Thomas Smith, one of my favorite people, the host of the Serious Inquiries Only podcast, just an awesome guy who I have mountains of respect for. I had that before this, and I have it even more so after this. They were in conversation on stage. Thomas, to his credit, tried to use his time to call out Carl Benjamin for his vileness, for his misogyny, for his racism and his assorted bigotries, and his cyberbullying, his incitement of harassment against people, predominantly women, but all sorts of people. And it did not go well. There was a point where Carl Benjamin was called out by Thomas for that aforementioned rape taunt to the British MP, and he happily took credit for it, admitted to it proudly, not an ounce of shame, not an ounce of regret, and he was applauded for it because the audience was full of people who thought that he was awesome. That was the crowd that Mythicist Milwaukee catered to. That was the crowd they hoped to attract. And that's what happened. You had a skeptical conference in 2017 in the United States where one of the invited featured speakers was cheered for telling a woman who had been sexually assaulted, "I wouldn't even rape you," which is sort of like a gangster saying to a shop owner, "It sure would be a shame if something happened to this nice shop." The storyline, the excuse, the apologetics for that are, well, it was a non-threat. He just wanted to prove how sensitive these SJWs are. He just wanted to prove how sensitive all these sexual assault survivors are by getting her to overreact to a non-threat, because that's in his warped mind, in his completely psychopathic, no empathy, no regard for another human being, no sense that the experiences of other people that are different than his might actually matter and be significant. In his mind, he saw that as a non-threat. Well, I didn't. I said I wouldn't rape her. It's the philosophical equivalent of, I'm not touching you. Why are you complaining? I'm not touching you. It's also the intellectual level that we're dealing with. This is a man who, I believe at once upon a time on his Twitter bio, before he was permanently banned from Twitter, which is hard to do. There are Nazis, there are flat out Nazis that don't get banned from Twitter. Somehow Carl Benjamin managed to get banned from Twitter. He's that big of a piece of shit. His Twitter bio at one point featured a quote from Plutarch, and this was around the same time that he was tweeting unsolicited porn to people. So this is the intellectual giant that you're dealing with. This is the intellectual giant that was invited to be one of the headliners at this skeptical conference by Mythicist Milwaukee. And some video of this went online. Some people who were there recorded it on their phones. There's a video of it, of this moment of when he was cheered for this "I wouldn't even rape you" taunt. And a lot of people in the community see that and maybe didn't know who Carl Benjamin was, didn't realize that the problem of misogyny and bigotry and intolerance and bullying in general was that bad in secular circles. And they see that video and of course they're aghast, they're appalled, they're terribly offended by it and shocked by it, and they should be. But at the same time, I wonder where these people have been. Where have you been? Because it's not a secret. Maybe it's kind of an open secret. Maybe it's not something that a lot of people talk about. I talk about it occasionally, but maybe I should talk about it more. I don't know. There is a faction of atheists. And yes, they are most vocal online. They are most vocal on YouTube. And they aren't usually represented on stage at conferences, but they do go to conferences, who are absolutely reprehensible, who hold absolutely just unacceptable, inexcusably vile, toxic attitudes toward women, toward people of color, toward trans folks and gay folks, toward disabled folks, toward pretty much anybody that doesn't fit into whatever box they are in. They see atheism, organized atheism, public atheism, as this white, cishet male dominated thing, and they're totally cool with that. They don't see a problem with that. They're not bothered by that at all. And in fact, some of them, when they see that as being threatened, when they perceive someone trying to tear down one of their cishet white male atheist idols, they get kind of rowdy about it. They get kind of pissy about it. Those people are here. They've been here all the time. If you've ever been to a skeptical conference, a secular atheist conference, you've stood side by side with those people, whether you know it or not. Maybe they were behaving themselves, but they were there. They've been a part of the community since the beginning. If you host a podcast that has a decent sized audience, they're listening to your show. Some of them are. If you have a YouTube channel that has a decent sized audience, even if you're someone like me and you try everything you can not to cater to those people, they're here. I know they're here. I know some of them will watch this. Most of them who watch it will watch it because some professional shitlord like Carl Benjamin or the other two I mentioned or someone else will make a response video to this and they'll say, look at what Steve Shives said this time, and they'll call me a cuck or an SJW or a mangina, or they'll make up some lies about me, or they'll disparage my wife and tell some other lies about the state of my marriage or how I used to be cool before I was indoctrinated into feminism, or whatever the fuck else they say. Most of them who watch this video will come as a result of one of those videos, but some of them will have been here anyway. They're like cockroaches. You can't really get rid of them. But it doesn't really help to just pretend that they're not here either. And it certainly doesn't help to invite them up on stage and to say, let's hear what they have to say. The guy who has 500,000 YouTube followers who blamed the Elliot Rodger shootings on the feminist system. Let's bring him up and see what else he has to say. The guy who says, and actually said on that stage in Milwaukee, well, that most of black people's problems are their own fault. Let's bring him up. Let's hear what he has to say. The guy who thinks he was being clever and making just a scintillating intellectual point by telling a woman who was a sexual assault survivor that he wouldn't even rape her. Let's invite that guy up on stage. Let's hear him out. Let's give his ideas a fair hearing. That doesn't help either. Usually that doesn't happen. Hopefully after MythCon that won't happen again, but the fact remains those people are here. And what are we going to do about it? Because we need to do something. Ignoring them doesn't help. Inviting them up on stage or inviting their representatives up on stage to debate, or worse yet, to just give them the microphone and let them say whatever horseshit they want, like was done with Armored Skeptic and Shoe on It. That doesn't work. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I do have a few suggestions that I think would be a good starting point, but I don't pretend that I know how to fix it. I would love to see Mythicist Milwaukee, that organization, die a slow or maybe even a quick and well-deserved death. I would like to see that organization cease to exist. I would like to see other secular organizations refuse to do business with them, refuse to give them the time of day, refuse to have them at their conferences, refuse to host them in their spaces, just refuse to have anything to do with them. I would like, if there is ever another MythCon or another event like this where some professional misogynists and rape apologists and racists from the dregs of the internet are invited as featured speakers at a conference, I would love to see every other supposedly reputable speaker or reputable invitee whose name is being used to market that event to pull out immediately and to just say, if they're invited, I'm not coming, and make a public statement and explain why, and encourage everyone who was going to come to that event to see them to not come. That's what should have happened with MythCon, because there were people who were invited who were and are reputable people, still showed up. If the moment that Mythicist Milwaukee invited Carl Benjamin as one of their featured speakers, if the moment that became public, everyone else who was invited said, we're not coming, that would have been the end of it. Either the event wouldn't have happened, or they would have disinvited Carl Benjamin and Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic, and that element would not have been there. The message would have been sent. You're not welcome here. We fucked up. I don't know who invited him, but we take responsibility. We're not inviting him. And if you are one of those people, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, don't come here. You're not welcome here. We don't want you here. And if maybe that takes you aback to hear that, oh, we shouldn't do that sort of thing. Not in the atheist community. We're open-minded. I invite you to listen or to find the transcript of David Silverman's opening address at this year's American Atheist Convention, which happened relatively soon after Charlottesville, where he said, and he was talking specifically about white supremacists, but I would humbly suggest that we expand it to all purveyors of intolerance, be they just primarily white supremacists or anti-feminists, misogynists of all stripe, anti-immigrant, whatever. David Silverman said, you're not welcome here. We know that some atheists hold these beliefs, but we don't want you here. We don't want your money. We don't want your support. We don't want to represent you. We don't want you here. And I was very happy to see in the comment section of somebody's Facebook post talking about MythCon in the aftermath of this, David Silverman, completely uninvited, just completely of his own volition, jumped in and said, this is disgusting. This kind of thing doesn't happen at American Atheist Conventions, and it never will. Good for him. I applaud that. I admire that. But at the same time, that's bare minimum. That's what everybody should say. That's what everybody at Mythicist Milwaukee's conference should have said. And except for a handful of people, nobody did. Aaron Ra was supposed to be there, not as a speaker, but as an invited guest for a movie premiere. He backed out. He said no. He said, I'm not coming. He was the first one. He was the first one to have the integrity to stand up and say, I'm not coming. I'm not going to be any part of this. You're not going to use my name to sell tickets for this. You're not going to use my presence there to legitimize these people and to make this seem like just a normal thing that we should all be in favor of. I'm not coming. Cancel my reservation. And I admired him already, and I admired him a lot more after that. Seth Andrews pulled out, not as gracefully. He had to be dragged. He reluctantly did the thing that he should have done from the beginning, and he's been whining and pissing about it ever since. About how unfair people have been to him, how we're not appreciative enough of what he did. But at least he did it. He had to be pushed and prodded and dragged for a week or more. He whined and complained the whole time about free speech police and the outrage brigade, but eventually he did the right thing, so I'll give him credit for that. But that's still two people out of all the people who were there. They were the only two that did it, that said, I'm not being a part of this, I'm not coming. Everybody should have. Everybody should have, including Thomas, and I love Thomas. Thomas Smith is one of my favorite people in the community, and my respect for him is undiminished because I think he chose to go in for the right reasons. He thought he was going to confront Sargon. He was going to show him to be the ugly little bigot that he is. And Thomas did better in that situation than anybody else could have, I think. He did as good a job as you possibly could have, knowing that the audience was totally tilted against him, knowing that the organizers, that the people who put on the event were totally tilted against him, that the whole thing had been set up as a showcase for Carl Benjamin and his absolutely vile, twisted, awful, bigoted worldview. Thomas did as good a job as anybody could have. But I wish he wouldn't have bothered. I wish he would have said, nope, I'm not coming. I'm not going to be a part of it. If you want to hold a shitlord convention, then have one and own it. And don't try to pretend that you're having a legitimate event because you invited some legitimate people. But that's what happened. A professional sexual harasser and rape apologist was a featured guest at an atheist convention, and they applauded him. They cheered for him because they were his people, because they believed the same awful shit that he believes. And I guarantee that for many of them, it was not their first conference. For some of them, it probably was. But all those people who applauded, I wouldn't even rape you, that wasn't their first conference for all of them. They've been to conferences before. Maybe a few of them were even at the American Atheist Convention, and they kind of squirmed in their seats a little bit when David Silverman called them out and said, we don't want you here. Maybe they felt attacked. I hope they did, because that's what they should feel. That's why they're here. That's why things like MythCon were even theoretically possible in the first place, because we've known that these people are in our midst the entire time. The atheist community in many ways is just a microcosm of American society in general. There are just certain elements that are even more amplified in our circles than in general. These misogynists, these racists, these anti-Muslim bigots, these anti-gay, anti-trans bigots, they've always been here. And they've always been comfortable here, for the most part. And that's the problem. We've known that they're here, and we've allowed them to be comfortable. We've allowed them to feel welcome. And I think it's time that we pull out that welcome mat. I think it's way past time. I think it should have been done years ago. But it's definitely time to do that now. At conferences, in online spaces, in podcast and YouTube fan communities. If you see these people in circles that you control or that you have some sway over, they need to know that they're not welcome, that you're not here for them, and that you don't want them to be here for you, that you don't want their support, you don't want their applause, you don't care if they agree with you on 99% of stuff, but they just disagree with you on the feminism stuff, or they disagree with you on the racial justice stuff. You don't want them. I sure as hell don't. I've made that as clear as I possibly can. If anybody out there is under any illusion that I give a fuck what you think, if you think that feminism is cancer or Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group or any of that other horseshit, or you think that Islam is uniquely evil among all the religions, that somehow it's just worse than Christianity or Judaism or other religions, and somehow when a Muslim kills somebody for what he believes is Muslim reasons, then somehow that's worse than when a Christian kills somebody for Christian reasons. If you believe that kind of shit, then I don't give a fuck about you. I don't care if you agree with me on other stuff. I don't care if you used to like me and now you don't. I don't care what percentage of my audience you are. I don't want you. Get the fuck out. And any space that I had any influence on whatsoever, I would say the same thing. I would say, I want these people to feel unwelcome. I don't want them here. I don't want this to be for them. If you're going to behave that way, if you're going to act that way, if you're going to perpetuate those beliefs, then I don't want you here. I don't care about you. I care more about the people who are victimized by you and by people who think like you. I want to have a place for them where they can feel safe, where they can feel valued, where they can feel included and listened to and taken seriously. Not you. You pathetic little hate mongers. Not you. You can fuck off to 4chan. You can go somewhere else. Start your own fucking convention. Do what Mythicist Milwaukee wanted to do, apparently, and just have a fucking shitlord convention. And wave your Kekistani flags and piss and moan about how easy black people have it in this country and how white privilege is such a horseshit concept and how the wage gap isn't real and all the other horseshit that you pass back and forth to each other like fucking sexually transmitted diseases. And have a good time, but fuck off from the rest of us. And if one of you has a big YouTube channel or a popular podcast or a popular blog and you have a big audience, you should be fucking blackballed from the legitimate skeptical conference circuit. There shouldn't be a single conference organizer that is willing to touch you. And some people might say, oh, Steve, I don't know, that sounds a little extreme. I don't think we should be blackballing people. Really? Well, then you should say something to Rebecca Watson about that. Ask her how it feels to be blackballed. Because the truth is, we are willing to blackball people in the atheist movement just for the completely wrong reasons and the wrong people. Ask around, see what you can find out about the little open, dirty little secret about how much Richard Dawkins hates to be on the panel or hates to have to be at an event with crazy feminists. See what you can find out about that. See how many people who have had to work with Dawkins or his people or have been involved in organizing events where Dawkins spoke know that story. Because it's way more than a few. So we're willing to blackball people if famous atheists don't like to work with them. If Richard Dawkins says, I'm not going to be there if she's going to be there. Oh, okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Dawkins. We'll blackball that person. And if we're going to do that, and we shouldn't, by the way, we should tell Richard Dawkins to go fuck himself if he makes those kinds of demands. I don't give a fuck how many tickets he sells. I don't care how famous he is. He should go fuck himself. But if we've already set the precedent, if we're already willing to blackball people because Dawkins doesn't like them because they're feminists, then what excuse do we have for not blackballing professional misogynists and rape apologists and inciters of harassment? We have no excuse. We have no excuse for tolerating these people. We have no excuse for catering to these people. We have no excuse for remaining silent about these issues because we know those people are in our audiences and we don't want to piss them off. We don't want to scare off our audience because some of us make a living doing this. Hey, I make a living doing this. Fuck those people. And fuck anybody who makes space for them. I make way less money than Seth Andrews does doing this. I guarantee you. I make way less money from my Patreon, from ad revenue from this YouTube channel. I earn a living, but it's not a great one. I'm willing to say fuck those people. I'm willing to stand up and at least try to be some kind of a fucking useful ally to people who are non-white, who are not gender binary, who are not men, who are not as privileged as I am in this community. I'm willing to take what little privilege I have and at least make a fucking effort. At least put myself out there that much and say, I want to help you. I want you to know that I'm with you. I want to do what I can to push your interests forward, to fight for you. There are people who are 10 times, 100 times as successful as I am in this community, off the backs of this community, off the donations and the listenership and the sponsorship of this community, who are willing to do not even that, who will barely open their mouths about this, who can't be bothered to pay attention to it. When people come up to them or talk to them on their Facebook page or their Twitter feed and say, these people are bad. Here's what you should be aware of. Here's what they do. Here's what we would hope that you would do in response. Here's what we need from you if you want to be thought of as an ally, if you want to be thought of as someone who's on our side, someone we can count on. Here's what we need from you. And they won't do it. In fact, If they follow the example of the person I just mentioned, they'll turn around and turn it on them, and they'll piss and moan at them. Well, what's good? Nothing's good enough. I've already said I'm against those people. I pulled out of the conference. I disagree with them. What more do you want from me? Stop policing my speech. Stop trying to control who I listen to. It's the outrage brigade. It's the fear pimps. They're just making a big deal out of it. They're making too big of a deal out of it. What about all the good people in the community? Like me. That's really the point. What about me? I'm a good guy. Stop making me feel like I'm not a good guy. Maybe you're not a fucking good guy. If you've sat still and watched all of this shit, everything that culminated at MythCon, that has been happening in this community for years, that we were first made aware of 5 years ago, 6 years ago, at Elevator Gate, that a lot of us have known about this whole time. And look, I didn't say enough about it at the time either. I'm guilty of being late to this party as much as a lot of other people, but I'm a hell of a lot earlier than some. And there are a lot of people who have a much bigger audience in this community, who have a much wider reach and a much firmer base to stand on than I have, who have said jack shit about this stuff for years. And then they do some bare minimum bit of objection to MythCon or to Carl Benjamin. They say, oh yeah, that's awful, I agree with you. And they want fucking applause. Well, fuck that. If you're really upset by what happened at MythCon, if you're really that outraged by it, if you really think that sort of thing should be unacceptable, then fucking do something about it. And I'm talking to the people who aren't doing anything about it. There are a lot of people who are doing a shit ton about it. There are a lot of people who run fucking awesome conferences, like Skepticon, like PastaCon, like AACon, like TAC coming up in New York next year, the first major atheist conference in New York City ever, that I'm proud to have been invited to participate in, that are doing everything they can to make this a good community, to make this a better place, to make sure that shit like happened at MythCon doesn't ever happen again. But there are plenty of people in this community who have the power and the reach to do a hell of a lot more and aren't doing shit and still want to be patted on the back. And to hell with that. If you have the power to say something. Say something. And don't just say something like, oh, that's awful. Fucking stick your neck out every once in a while. Make sure the people who listen to you know about this and know where you stand. And listen to the marginalized people who are telling you about this. Don't just wave them off. Don't treat them like pests, like insects buzzing around your head. Listen to them. The people that you want to be allies to. The people that you want to think of you as a good guy, as a socially conscious, progressive, open-minded guy. A guy who hates hate speech and hates to see intolerance and abuse. Listen to what they're telling you. Like so many people utterly failed to do in the lead up to MythCon. Do something. If you see that video of Carl Benjamin getting applauded for being a fucking rape apologist and it just burns you up and you just hate it. I hate to see that happening in secular communities. Well, it's been happening all along. Do something about it.